I got one more question from the audience. I'll just throw it out to the panel. Does anybody think that the traditional assured 7.5 compounded return will ever return, should it be 4.5%?
Well, I'll just go to the historic rate of return for Cook County from 1990 to 2010, so this includes the Great Recession, was 7.7%.
And we're talking about the return that the pension funds are counting on, am I right?
Right, but their actual return, including the Great Recession from 1990 to 2010, was 7.7%.
But isn't one of the criticisms that they're too optimistic, and as a result, a lot of bad decisions are stemming from that optimism?
7.5 is less than 7.7. Their actual historic return is higher than their assumption.
Right, but one correction, so in 2011, the return of the Cook County Pension Fund was 1.2%, which means that the 5-year return was 2.7, the 10-year return was 4.5, and the 20-year return was now just under 7.5. And so if you have to go back 23 years and average it out to get a return that exceeds the estimate, we're actually having a hearing about this on Monday at the board, and you know, when I put that in the report that they had exceeded over 20 years 7.5, it was based on the end of 2010. I don't think we should drop down to 4.5%, but you know, it's a volatile thing, and when you're relying on the majority of your inputs from investments, you certainly do make yourself vulnerable.
We're not making proper actuarial contributions using the current assumptions. So if we lower them, then it will be more expensive to make the proper actuarial contributions. Now, I regrettably am of the school of Yogi Berra, I think, who once said something along the lines of, predicting the future would be easy if we just knew what the heck was going to happen, or something to that effect. So I actually don't know, but I think, you know, you have to have your eyes open. And when you lower the earnings assumption, you raise the contribution. So we can't seem to pay for it based on the current assumptions. So I'm not too keen about getting too far ahead to lower them. I mean, certainly you go to 4.5 or 4.25. That's just I mean, that's more sabotage than a serious proposal, because talk about being unaffordable.
I just have to take a point of personal privilege. I just would love your response to the alderman in particular who said that the reason why they have the pensions they have is that they can be voted out of office. How does that work?
Look, I think that is, someone was probably just looking for an answer to a question, and I think the tragic part about these articles about various abuses to the pension, to Hank's point, you can always pull out a couple of examples, and they end up giving you a picture of something that isn't really an accurate picture. There are 15,000 county retirees. You never really read about it, not kind of the county problems. But even at the city, there are, you know, tens of thousands of people who retire after a very honorable career and go on in a perfectly, I mean, the average county pension is $32,000 a year. The average pension at the city is, I think, $34,000 a year. No one is going into the public sector pension retiree business to get rich. And so these stories are, you know, it's, if I was not in polite company, I would give you what my actual thought was about what this is between the media and itself on where these aldermanic pensions. This is just a distraction. At the end of the day, we have a real problem to solve. There are real people who are relying on this to be a serious endeavor, and I think all that stuff is a rounding error and it's silliness. So hopefully that gets set aside, and we actually can come to some right conclusions.
I just have to respond to that. It's not silliness. Those abuses are real abuses, and the taxpayers have a right to expect that the people who are writing the laws, the people that we are voting into office, would hold themselves to some standard by which they take the same pension as everyone else, not writing special legislation into effect to take care of themselves and other insiders. It's true that the overall cost of so few elected officials, and we should point out that we have more elected officials than any other state in the United States, but in relative terms to the overall number of employees, the fiscal impact of even the abuses pales in comparison to the problems caused by the underfunding. That doesn't mean that other states provide the sort of gratuitous benefits to their elected officials and extraordinary pension benefits that we do in Illinois. They don't. When you meet with people from other states who do the same type of work the Civic Federation does, they're in shock that the citizens, let alone the legislators, would allow these things to happen and continue.
No, I agree. I feel that everyone should be in the same plan. We put that in our proposal. My point is, though, we need to focus on this as a serious issue and not spend as much time as we do on individual foibles.
All right, let's get closing comments real quickly, and then we will wrap it up. Hank, you want to begin?
I'll just echo what Ralph said and use a medical analogy, if I may. The pension problem and the underfunding problem is not the disease. It is the symptom. There's symptoms all over the place. Pensions is just one of them. You know, we have a difficult time in this country at many levels paying for the government that our citizens want. And part of the problem is, as Ralph said, we have a 1930s state and local revenue system in this state. In a 21st century economy, we've had at the federal level particularly, but to some degree at the state level, public policies that have created a kind of a regressive tax system where the public resents the notion of higher taxes partly because the average person has the big burden of them, whereas the wealthy people get off with a very light burden. And what we need in this country and in this state and in the city is comprehensive, progressive, fair tax reform so that we can raise an adequate amount of money from the people that earn it and have it to fund the government that our citizens want and deserve.
Thank you.
So I think the thing I'd like to leave you with is that we are, I think that a defined benefit program, or a program that focuses on retirement income, is a possibility. I think that we have the opportunity here to lead the way and show how it can be sustainable for the next generation. I think you need to give people a sense of stability, both with their retirement income as well as their health care. But I also think it needs to look different, and that doesn't mean that it's somehow welshing on anything, or it doesn't mean that it's somehow unfair or implicitly wrong. It means that it needs to look different, and it needs to be a serious contemplation of how people need to survive in retirement and how they need to live a good and dignified retirement life. And I think that we have the opportunity to do that.
Lawrence?
I want to thank all the panelists here. They're very well respected. They have my respect. In particular, Commissioner Gaynor, I urge you to go to her website if you want to know more about the county pension situation. I commend her for stepping up in a very transparent way to offer alternatives to keep the discussion going. The state of Illinois is broke, okay? It's broke financially. It is broke in terms of the way it addresses problems. All of you as citizens, I commend you for participating, for staying here tonight to listen to all of us. But you have a responsibility for yourself, for your children, to put pressure where it needs to be. All pension decisions are decided in Springfield by the legislature. If we miss this opportunity to stabilize the state's finances, we run the risk of the state actually collapsing. You can hear it in terms of the Medicaid proposal. The state is carrying $9 billion after a large tax increase, after the income tax increase. We're still going to carry $9 billion in unpaid bills into next year. We're still, basically, if we don't reform the pensions, going to be having a growth in how much money we're going to have to continue to contribute to these pensions. And most people who look at the problem don't think it's feasible that we could devote 27% of all of our resources into the pension system. The problems in Cook County's pension are not identical to the problems of the state of Illinois, but they are all compounded and tied to the fact that we don't let the actuaries tell us what the cost of the program is and then fund that. Instead, we deal with accounting gimmicks and other creations in Illinois, and that is putting this whole state in jeopardy.
Well,
For just a little perspective, we're only putting 5% of our general fund revenue into the pension systems to pay for current benefits for current workers, and that's 100% covering the normal cost of them. All the rest of that additional cost is paying debt, calling it pension debt is simply misleading. It is debt. It is money the state borrowed to subsidize the delivery of services for decades. We've got to find a rational way to pay it back. We don't solve any of our problems, no matter what they do with pension benefits, unless we fix that amortization schedule. That's number one. Number two, we don't sustain any solutions unless we fix the revenue system, because it's that structural deficit that has led to the fiscal chicanery that has encouraged politicians for decades to not make their pension contribution and instead divert that revenue to covering services to paper over the real problem. We as voters and taxpayers have to step to the plate and understand we need to pay for the services we consume. And the reality is, spending on services has not driven any of our problems from a fiscal standpoint. In fact, today in Illinois, we are spending 25% less on education, healthcare, including Medicaid, by the way. Education, healthcare, human services, and public safety than we did in the year 2000 after we adjusted for inflation. We are cutting our investment in every core service because we have a revenue system that simply cannot support a basic level of fundamental services, much less make the pension contribution. So whatever we do on pensions, if you want to sustain it, fix the revenue side, or we'll still be here looking for new ways to cheat workers.
And we'll have to leave it there.